See what you did, Stephanie? Do you see the problems you have brought upon this team with your antics this season, Stephanie White? This is what you have done. Now we have to contemplate. We have to think about the what ifs. What ifs that shouldn't even exist because of the antics and the foolishness you pulled this season. What are you?
Lexie Hull broke down in tears on live television after the WNBA sent her a warning that could change everything about her future. The Indiana Fever star couldn't hold back her emotions as she faced the cameras, knowing that one more incident could end her season completely. This wasn't just any regular player having a bad day. This was the heart and soul of the Fever franchise finally reaching her breaking point after months of being treated worse than a bench warmer. But here's what makes this even more devastating. Hull received this warning not because she was causing problems or being a diva. She got flagged because she finally stood up for herself after watching coach Stephanie White destroy everything she had worked for. The woman who played through 2 black eyes, who sacrificed her body night after night, who earned Caitlin Clark's complete trust, was now being punished by the league for refusing to stay silent about the disrespect.
6 Lexie Hulls is a free agent this offseason. The Indiana Fever will protect her in the expansion draft, whatever. And Lexie Hull's gonna have suitors. With the way she performed down the stretch and in the playoffs, the way she was guarding, the way she had a couple big nights shooting the basketball, Lexie Hull is gonna have suitors. You better believe the Portland Fire will be interested, the Seattle Storm will be interested, and they will be willing to probably pay her top dollar.
The tears weren't just about the warning itself, they were about everything that led to this moment. Hull had been the perfect teammate for years, never complaining when she got benched for no reason, never speaking out when White brought in washed up veterans to take her spot, never causing drama even when she was clearly the better option. She did everything right and still got treated like garbage. What happened next will shock you even more. The WNBA warning came after Hull finally reached her limit during a team meeting. Sources close to the situation revealed that Hull called out White's coaching decisions in front of the entire roster. She pointed out how ridiculous it was that players who quit on the team got better treatment than someone who bled for the franchise. She mentioned how White lied to the media about team chemistry while throwing loyal players under the bus. The league stepped in because they were worried about team unity, but they completely missed the real problem.
Because of the bonehead Stephanie White. Let's be clear. Lexie Hull got straight up played and disrespected by this new Fever regime. Kelly Crosskoff, Amber Cox, Stephanie White straight up disrespected her. They acted as if Lexie Hull was not a part of the core 4 who helped turn this team around. It wasn't just CCAB and Kelsey. No, Lexie Hull was a huge part of that. A huge part of that before Stephanie White got here. Stephanie White came to the Indiana Fever and straight up disregarded everything Lexie Hull did the year before.
Instead of investigating why one of their most respected players was having a public meltdown, they decided to threaten her with suspension. Instead of looking into White's questionable coaching methods, they put a target on Hull's back for speaking the truth. And here's the part that should terrify every Fever fan. This warning gave Hull every reason she needed to walk away from Indiana completely. She already knew that other teams were watching her situation closely. The Portland Fire had been making calls about her availability. The Seattle Storm was preparing a massive offer package. Now with the WNBA essentially telling her to shut up and accept poor treatment, Hull had the perfect excuse to demand a trade or leave in free agency. The crying wasn't weakness, it was the emotional release of someone who finally realized that loyalty means nothing in professional sports. Hull had given everything to this franchise, and they repaid her with warnings and threats instead of respect and appreciation. Let's rewind to where this disaster actually started. When Stephanie White took over as head coach, she walked into a situation where 4 players had already transformed the Indiana Fever from a laughingstock into a legitimate contender. Caitlin Clark was the obvious superstar, Kelsey Mitchell was the proven scorer, Aaliyah Boston was the defensive anchor, and Lexie Hull was the glue that held everything together. These 4 players had chemistry that coaches dream about. White decided she knew better than everyone else. Instead of building around what was already working, she completely ignored Hull's contributions and brought in her own hand-picked veterans.
All of a sudden, DeWanna Bonner quits on the team. She's no-showing it. She's no-showing work while receiving payments. Stephanie White is getting on the camera, lying to us, acting like everything is all good, lying to us when you knew everything wasn't all good. You knew that. Only for an article to come out the same day DeWanna Bonner refused to return to the team. You think Lexie Hull don't remember that? You threw me to the back burner for her and she quit. She didn't even have the decency to contact us, her teammates, and let us know she won't be coming back.
The first victim of White's ego trip was Hull, who suddenly found herself watching from the bench while newcomers got her minutes. Not only that, but White's treatment of Hull was borderline insulting. Hull had spent the previous season proving she belonged in the starting lineup. She had developed incredible chemistry with Clark, becoming the one player Caitlin trusted most in clutch situations. Hull's defensive versatility allowed the Fever to switch on screens and guard multiple positions. Her willingness to take charges and dive for loose balls set the tone for the entire team's effort level. White threw all of that away because she wanted to put her own stamp on the roster. She acted like Hull's previous contributions meant absolutely nothing. The coach, who was supposed to maximize her players' strengths, instead chose to ignore the player who had already maximized her role perfectly. But wait, it gets worse. White didn't just bench Hull randomly. She made it personal by constantly praising other players in press conferences while barely mentioning Hull's name. When reporters asked about rotations, White would talk about needing veteran leadership and experience, basically calling Hull too young and inexperienced despite her proven track record. The psychological warfare was obvious to everyone except White herself. Hull would make game-changing plays in limited minutes, and White would immediately pull her out for no clear reason. Hull would lock down the opposing team's best scorer, and White would still find reasons to criticize her effort. Hull would hit clutch three-pointers, and White would act like it was just luck instead of skill. Here's what really happened behind the scenes. Hull started questioning everything about her role with the team. She began wondering if she had done something wrong or if she wasn't good enough anymore. The player who had always been confident in her abilities started doubting herself because her own coach was treating her like a liability instead of an asset. White's handling of Hull became a case study in how to destroy a player's confidence and team chemistry at the same time. Other players on the roster started noticing the unfair treatment, which created tension in the locker room. Some veterans felt uncomfortable getting minutes they hadn't earned, while younger players worried they could be next on White's hit list. Now here's where Stephanie White's decision-making went from questionable to absolutely catastrophic. White decided that Hull wasn't good enough to start, so she went out and signed Dara Bonner to a maximum contract. Not just any contract, but the biggest deal they could offer. White basically told the entire organization that this aging veteran was more valuable than the young player who had already proven herself in their system. Bonner got handed a starting position before she even stepped foot on the court for her first practice. Meanwhile, Hull was told she needed to earn her minutes, despite having already earned them the previous season. The message was crystal clear. White valued her own recruits more than the players who had actually built the franchise's recent success. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. Bonner completely quit on the team in the middle of the season. She didn't just have a bad game or struggle with injuries. She literally stopped showing up to work while still collecting her massive paycheck. The player that White had prioritized over Hull turned out to be a complete fraud who had zero commitment to winning. The situation got even more embarrassing when White started lying to the media about what was happening. She held press conferences talking about how everything was fine with the team chemistry, how everyone was buying into the system, how there were no internal problems. White was straight up deceiving reporters and fans, while Bonner was already mentally checked out and planning her exit. And then the truth exploded everywhere. The same day, White was telling everyone that the team was unified and focused. A major article dropped exposing the real story. Bonner had refused to return to the team and had been avoiding contact with coaches and teammates for weeks. The veteran that White had chosen over Hull had abandoned her responsibilities without even having the decency to communicate with anyone. Think about how Hull must have felt watching this unfold. The coach had basically told her she wasn't worth investing in, then gave a max contract to someone who quit on the team. White had destroyed Hull's confidence and role for a player who couldn't even be bothered to show up for work. The disrespect was so obvious that even casual fans started questioning White's judgment. Not only that, but White never apologized for the disaster. Instead of admitting she had made a terrible mistake by choosing Bonner over Hull, White acted like it was just bad luck. She never acknowledged that Hull had been right there the whole time, ready to contribute and actually caring about the team's success. White treated the Bonner situation like an unfortunate accident instead of taking responsibility for her own poor decision-making. everything. The Bonner debacle exposed everything wrong with White's coaching philosophy. She valued names and reputations over actual performance and character. She made promises to players who hadn't earned them while ignoring the player who had already proven her worth through actions rather than words. Here's what happened when Stephanie White finally had no choice but to play Lexie Hull. After Bonner quit and injuries forced White's hand, Hull stepped onto the court and immediately reminded everyone why she had been part of the core four. She didn't just play well, she dominated in ways that made White's previous decisions look absolutely ridiculous. Hull was locking down opposing teams' best scorers, hitting clutch shots, and making winning plays that championship teams are built on. The transformation was instant and undeniable. Caitlin Clark looked completely different when Hull was on the court with her. The chemistry they had developed was still there, and Clark finally had someone she could trust to make the right play in crucial moments. Hull's defensive intensity elevated the entire team's effort level, and her willingness to sacrifice her body for loose balls set a tone that other players followed. But wait, there's more proof of how valuable Hull really was. During the stretch when she finally got consistent minutes, the Fever's defensive rating improved dramatically. They were switching on screens more effectively, communicating better, and forcing turnovers at a higher rate. Hull's versatility allowed them to play different defensive schemes that White hadn't been able to use with other lineups. Hull wasn't just making routine plays either. She was hitting game-changing three-pointers in clutch situations, diving into the stands for loose balls, and taking charges against players much bigger than her. The hustle plays that never show up in box scores but absolutely determine who wins close games. Hull was making all of them consistently, and here's the most frustrating part for Fever fans. Even after Hull proved she deserved major minutes, White found new ways to disrespect her. When Sophie Cunningham returned from injury, White immediately put Hull back on the bench despite her recent outstanding performances. There was no logical basketball reason for this decision. Hull had been playing better than Cunningham and had earned the right to keep her spot. White's rotation decisions during this period made absolutely no sense to anyone watching the games. Hull would make 3 straight defensive stops and hit a crucial three-pointer, then get pulled from the game for no apparent reason. She would completely shut down an opposing star player, then watch from the bench while that same player went off against her replacement. Let's be completely honest about what was happening. White was more concerned with justifying her previous roster decisions than actually winning basketball games. She couldn't admit that Hull had been the right choice all along, so she kept finding excuses to limit her minutes even when Hull was clearly their best option at certain positions. The stats during Hull's increased playing time told the whole story. The team's net rating was significantly better with her on the court. Their defensive efficiency improved, their ball movement was crisper, and they played with more energy and focus. Hull had proven beyond any doubt that she deserved to be a key rotation player, but White's ego prevented her from fully embracing that reality. Let's talk about the reality check that should terrify every Indiana Fever fan. Lexie Hull is a free agent this summer, and after everything Stephanie White put her through, she has every reason to take her talents somewhere else. The Portland Fire and Seattle Storm aren't just casually interested, they're preparing serious offers with guaranteed starting positions and top-dollar contracts. These teams watched Hull get disrespected all season, and they're ready to show her what real appreciation looks like. Hull brings exactly what every championship contender needs. She doesn't require plays drawn up for her, doesn't need to dominate the ball, and doesn't create locker room drama. She just makes everyone around her better while doing all the dirty work that wins games. Teams are literally drooling over the possibility of adding someone with her skill set and character to their roster. But here's the kicker that makes this situation even more maddening. While the Fever are publicly begging Kelsey Mitchell to stay and talking about how important she is to their future, they've been completely silent about Hull. Where are the press conferences about keeping Hull? Where are the public commitments about her being part of their core? The organization is treating her like an afterthought, while other teams are preparing to make her a centerpiece. White had no problem promising Bonner a max contract and starting position before she even played a game. She had no problem letting Natasha Howard talk about winning MVPs while underperforming all season. But Hull, who actually earned her spot through blood, sweat, and results, gets treated like she should be grateful for whatever scraps they throw throw her way, and here's what's about to happen if Indiana doesn't wake up fast. Hull's agent is already fielding calls from multiple teams who are willing to offer her everything White refused to guarantee. Starting position, significant money, and most importantly, respect from day one. These teams aren't going to jerk her around or make her prove herself again. They already know what she brings to the table. The Seattle Storm could offer Hull a chance to play alongside other unselfish winners who prioritize team success over individual glory. The Portland Fire could make her a foundational piece of their new franchise, giving her the recognition she never got in Indiana. Either option would be infinitely better than staying with a coach who has repeatedly shown she doesn't value Hull's contributions. Not only that, but Hull has zero reason to give Indiana a hometown discount. Why would she take less money to stay with an organization that has disrespected her repeatedly? Why would she accept a bench role when other teams are offering her starting positions? The loyalty argument goes both ways, and the Fever haven't shown Hull any loyalty worth reciprocating. If you're enjoying this breakdown of how Stephanie White created this disaster, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more honest takes on what's really happening behind the scenes in women's basketball.